Hello everyone, welcome to an analysis of dance where we discuss the movements and debuts of the Billboard dance charts in immaculate detail within our reviews of each debut each week. So quite frankly, I was expecting that this week would be pretty rough, especially when the most notable and interesting debut came from fucking Marshmello in 2026. And even with that in mind, wow, this week somehow got even worse than I expected. This was rough. I mean, there were some exciting stories, especially on Hot Dance, that are worth noting, but other than that, it was a complete mess for me, and with particularly notable news regarding one other chart that's either been abandoned outright or delayed for this week. Yeah, not looking good, especially when there's a lot of stuff here that just outright sucks and I wish would go away fast. And even if Hot Dance was the best part of this week, there were still some rough moments throughout. Even if the top is still going to Dracula by Tay Impala and Jenny at number 1, which is just dominant. It's topping radio at the moment and streaming is ridiculously strong. Don't expect anything to dethrone this, at least for the next couple of, well, months, going out to a year at this point. But that takes us to number 2, which was the big story, as I called this week, with Another Drink by Marshmello and Kelsea Ballerini getting there. And it's really only here because of streaming and certainly not because radio is on board with it, and given the quality of Marshmello's recent material, I don't blame them at all. But I think what's more interesting is that this hit number 2 on this chart and was number 1 on Bubbling Under, which implies that there's a lot more room for competition moving forward. And that's honestly good, because No Broke Boys by Disco Lines International didn't capitalize off of songs losing above it down at number 3, which I think is really telling that it's finally on its way out. So I can really hope that other stuff comes through and actually knocks it down further. Although it probably only held its spot because of the complete and expected collapse of Miss You by Oliver Tree and Robyn Schultz at number 4. Now I'm interested in this one, considering that there was a period of time where Billboard enforced age recurrency rules, especially with songs that chart thanks to Extraordinary Circumstances, which this one unfortunately did. And given that it's 3 weeks into its run and songs like, say, Rasputin by Bonnie M or the multiple Daft Punk and Bee Gees songs from 2021, they fell victim after 3 weeks, I might see this actually leaving next week. Not really gonna complain, it had its moment again. And that certainly opens up the door for Take Me by Danny at number 5, which at least at this point is now looking more stable than ever. It actually rebounded in considerable amounts, especially with Ian Asher's remix now actually being back on streaming platforms. And given that it hit the Bubbling Under at one point, I can see this making a run again. Not really gonna complain. And then there's Go by the Chemical Brothers featuring Cutie at number 6, which honestly I'm not really surprised is actually holding out pretty well. It's a really well-liked song, and even if the viral moment was gonna not really have a ton of staying power on sales, it looks like people are still legitimately streaming this one. That's welcome for me. That also mostly applies to Free Your Mind by Prosper and Clooney at number 7, although in this case it's just remarkably stable across the board, even if the album impact didn't really last besides this track, and I really hope that more from Prosper actually charts soon. He's got a lot of potential to be huge again. But now onto something that, quite frankly, I'm astonished that is even in the top 10, and I can't believe I'm saying this. Meant to Be by Cunt Sniffer is at number 8. Now I could really establish that this is only gaining momentum because Scenecore is having a big revival in 2026, definitely helped by the big global breakthrough that I will talk about a bit later on that's easily opening up the doors for more acts to get momentum. But even before that came along, this had legitimate streaming hype behind it, and at the rate it's going, it's going to get even higher. I'm not really going to complain about it from a song perspective, even if everything around Spencer that's come out recently is not exactly good. Again, I really hope that this is the only song that he has that becomes a hit. And if it means we finally bulldoze Like a Prayer by Josh Fawaz at number 9, I'm certainly not going to complain. That song has finally gone bad viral, with a lot of people going to the general assumption that the vocals were AI, and it's gotten to a point where Triple J and Anthony Fantano are talking about it, which I think is a really bad sign for its success long term. And given that there's a lot of stuff beneath that could knock down this pile of garbage, and quite frankly I don't see anything from Josh Fawaz actually having a run besides this, yeah, this moment might be finally done. Good riddance. And finally, Talk to You by Another featuring 54 Ultra at number 10. It's just getting beaten now on streaming, even if it did see a little loss this week, and really at this rate it's probably not going to end up being a smash hit in summer, at least in the US. It's doing really well globally though, I'll give it that. But on our falls and fall-offs, outside of the top 10. Yeah, there's nothing but positive stuff here. I'm not really going to complain. Yes, Don't Want Your Love by Millennium and Ellie Goulding was going to leave again, and it's a bit of a shame. It is still a great track, but the fact that actually charted the third week is kind of miraculous. And if it's going to take out the utter underperformance of DNA by Andrea Bocelli, David Guetta, EJ and Megan Thee Stallion out, and really it's indicative of David Guetta's absolute flop sweat singles that have come out recently, yeah, I don't really think I'm going to complain all that much. And on that note, the biggest story of this week, alongside the debut from last week Not Lasting, we also saw the long overdue exit of Multigame Alchemia by MT Santos, High Time and MC Melody Alvarado. And with that, this is the first week in several years where funk music is completely gone from the charts. Took us a lot of pain and suffering to get here, but we finally made it. Oh, thank God that's the case. And the fourth do continue that good news, as while we expectedly lost Good Genug by Kitsch Grieg, Blumengarten and Shirin David off its viral moment to 16, the rest of these are pretty damn bad, and I'm not really going to complain about them leaving. Yappa K by Faruko, Greasy and Steve Aoki is already losing its momentum to 20. Matrix by Crumb is an unfinished fragment, so the fact it fell to 22 isn't surprising either. John Summit's two remaining songs of Don't Believe It with Absolutely and All the Time with the Chainsmokers and Ilse fell to 23 and 24 respectively. Again, it's indicative of this album not really having much staying power at all. And most amazingly and surprising for me, Jamaican Bam Bam by Hugo and Salto fell down to 19, even despite the album's impact actually coming through this week. And on that note, nothing from that album managed to chart at all. Not even the David Guetta and French Montana collab that I thought would debut pretty high. If that's not indicative that Hugo's moment is starting to really run dry, I don't know what is. And since we had no comebacks or jumps that really mattered this week, well, yeah, let's just get straight into those four debuts, where we have to start particularly gross with number 21, Meet Chico by DJ Goja, Jason Derulo and Melody.
She got that vibe, Chico. Dance all night, Chico. Love it when she call me Chico.
Well, we're finally here, unfortunately. The first time that any song is charted where I can comfortably say that the original song is mostly generated by AI. Gross. I mean, between DJ Goja's really suspicious profile with a ton of AI-generated artwork, as well as the bio, which has the classic misspellings of something you'd expect from ChatGPT, including commas in the wrong spot and dashes in between sentences, again, it's really blatantly obvious. And that's on top of the other lack of creds for the female vocalist on the original track, where Suno is pretty obviously the main thing that's contributing to this song. Yeah, it's gross. So naturally, considering how much of a hack he's become, Jason Derulo jumped onto a remix and brought on board Melody, who is not the same Melody who sung on Eurovision a couple of years ago, but instead a Brazilian singer who's actually got a pretty decent following, coming off the back of a bunch of collaborations in Brazilian funk. I at least understand why she's here. And yeah, while this is obviously a bit better on the merit of having actual real vocalists on it, there is no reason to keep this around too. It sucks a lot. The beat may have some atmosphere, but it feels incredibly flat and one-dimensional for Afro House standards. Definitely not helped by the fact that there's next to nothing really going on in the content that's worth interesting analysis at all. And when Melody is such a non-presence on this song, where she kind of imitates the original song's fake female vocals and makes it really hard to distinguish what she actually brings here, the main focus is Jason Derulo, who sounds about as flat and as uninterested as you can get. Feels like he's only on here for the name recognition and also the money that he's going to get off of this blowing up, and at this rate, it's just gross across the board. Hell, he has to share the same vocal melodies with that fake female vocalist from the original track. That's how little he matters here. Why the hell is he even doing this? Again, I have no idea why people continue to platform this sort of garbage AI slop which this is, and considering that there's no element of this remix that remotely stands out in comparison to your slew of other forgettable and really lazy forms of Afro House, yeah, not worth keeping around. This sucks, skip it. Number 18, Cutie Mew Mew Magic by Toby Fox featuring Camellia. Besides, I can draw all my interest towards what's quite frankly one of the most wildly overdue stories that I've seen on this chart. 2 songs from Toby Fox, of all people, charting on the main Hot Dance charts, and one of them featuring Camellia getting his first charting song in 2026. That's utterly bizarre. So for the very few of you who don't know, Toby Fox is a video game producer and electronic artist who's gotten most notable thanks to his work on the game Undertale, which has scored hundreds of millions of streams and has become the sort of massive viral phenomenon that he hasn't really been able to replicate since. And that's not even including Camellia, who's a Japanese producer who's actually worked with Toby Fox a few times and has made some other collaborations with artists in the bass scene. He's got a pretty decent following, but not one that I expected would ever let him cross over to the main chart at all. But now with 2 songs starting this week off the game Deltarune, with Chapter 5 in particular blowing up to a level where these were actually able to get here and genuinely look like they're going to stick around, even if I'm admittedly not familiar with the source material and probably not really interested in playing that sort of stuff. It's not my genre of video game. I was at least hopeful that these would be genuinely great, especially considering that Toby Fox's instincts on that Undertale soundtrack were fantastic, and well, yeah, they both are, with this easily being the better one for me. I mean, it's got much more of that faster J-pop adjacent groove with some cutesy vocal samples that sound fantastic, and with the vocal melodies being so precise and so interesting, even in a mix that is this busy, it's really indicative of how Camellia actually contributed on this track. The female vocals especially do sound like something that he would use in his songs, and it sounds fantastic next to Toby Fox's production. And considering the strong instincts that both have in chiptune and video game music, yeah, this genuinely works, as does number 13, Flower Man by Toby Fox. I mean, there's not really a ton to really say about this one. It's going for that old school throwback 80s video game racing soundtrack with a lot of parallels to the stuff that Mario Kart was using back in the day, and honestly that's a huge compliment for me as a fan of Mario Kart. And while I don't think this has the insane level of detail and manic energy that Cutie Mew Mew Magic does, it's still absolutely great. I really appreciate songs that go for this more heavier rock adjacent sound next to the chiptune elements, and with the guitars and bass just sounding fantastic here and really taking me back to the old golden age of video games, which is absolutely a huge plus for me. Yeah, this tips into absolute greatness for me as well. No idea if either of these songs are going to last long term, but given the streaming numbers are actually looking pretty good moving forward, I can see these both having a chance of actually sticking around. That would be genuinely welcome for me. Both great songs, this is worth hearing. Number 2, Another Drink by Marshmello and Kelsea Ballerini.
No, she don't want a thing, she just wants another drink. Don't wanna share a smoke, don't wanna take you home. No, she don't want a thing, she just wants another drink.
Whereas with this, I shouldn't even be disappointed that Kelsea Ballerini stooped to working with Marshmello in 2026. I mean, she did collaborate with the Chainsmokers back in 2018 when she was at a much more notable peak of popularity, and given that her new material is not performing the same way that her older stuff has, despite a lot of it being great, it doesn't surprise me that she wanted to cut loose a little bit and do something different. Problem is that it's working with Marshmello, who has been consistently awful for the last couple of years, especially in these country EDM collaborations, where after Miles on It, I really had hoped that he would move on, but clearly he's still trying to chase that high, to mixed and underwhelming results at best. So I finally heard this song, and after hearing it, it's not as bad as I expected, but it's still not all that good. The main problem, once again, is Marshmello's production, where his fusion of the country elements, especially in that guitar, just sound really ugly next to the percussion that goes more for a trap approach. And while the first verse and the first drop were at least decent, the mixing overall just completely deteriorates as the song goes on. I mean, it just gets utterly ruined by the trap skitters that just sound completely anonymous and one-dimensional, and especially with that final drop with the mixing and mastering sounding so cluttered and compressed as the vocals just overwhelm over everything else there. It just sounds atrocious on a production level. I don't understand why people still give this shit a pass. And that takes us to Kelsea Ballerini herself. Look, I get that she wants to cut loose. Again, I'm not surprised that she's on here, but between her weaker vocal vocal performance that prioritizes the loudness and lack of dynamics over any sort of interesting performance. She just sounds completely buried up this mix and really highlights how her best material is when she goes for something more lighter and is able to match her delicate vocals. Here with a production that sounds this loud, it just makes her feel anonymous, which is a really bad sign. Look, it's not the worst of these kinds of songs that Marshmello has put out, but it's also utterly inessential for me, and quite frankly, even if I don't mind that this knocked down No Broke Boys and actually has a chance of sticking around, I would prefer that artists who actually know what they're doing in country EDM collaborations were getting this instead. This isn't very good, you can skip it as well. Now this would be where I talk about dance pop, but unfortunately because Billboard is utterly incompetent at that job, that chart has either been delayed or abandoned outright. It still hasn't updated from last week, and it's been several days since the chart's all updated. So in the offhand chance it actually does update moving forward, well fuck it, it's only going to get a little bit of a mention in the description because quite frankly I have no use for this anymore. And with the majority of the songs they're just not moving at all, I wouldn't even be surprised if they've abandoned it. It's one of the least interesting charts that they've introduced in recent memory. But thankfully on dance streaming, at least one song that I expected would debut there was actually able to debut and be considered an exclusive, although I don't see that lasting next week, or at least I hope so. Although unfortunately coming with Another Drink by Marshmello and Kelsea Ballerini debuting at number 10. Yeah, yikes, it's actually has streaming momentum, that's not a good sign. But onto that big debut that's absolutely going to surge up next week and be a serious contender long term, well, number 9, Misery by Pupsies.
Nice to me, but only in the evening. So I ask, am I just dreaming? I love you so much that it's dripping, dripping from my heart and such. I'm sorry, I know I'm too much to love to trust. I'm nothing but.
Okay, so this is the sort of song that really just came right the hell out of nowhere. For context, Pupsies is a 19-year-old biracial and transgender scene-core artist who really has blown up entirely off of this song alone, riding a movement that's been getting a surprising amount of rebound in momentum. And while I've been admittedly a bit mixed on this scene as a whole, if it's going to enable more people in minority groups to actually get momentum, especially with the current climate not exactly being favourable towards transgender artists, especially considering what's going on around the world at the moment, I think that's really cool. Even if the song itself may be bad, I'm at least okay with it actually sticking around. And in this case, well, it's not bad by any means. It's a pretty decent earworm that I can absolutely understand why it's sticking around. And seriously, on production alone, this is genuinely great. It's going for that more faster chiptune approach with some blockhouse elements that actually sound really nice. And when the mix actually expands with the percussion going through with a much heavier sound, it honestly really worked for me on a production level. I can see the appeal. Problem though is that Pupsies on vocals just doesn't really sound that good. She's going for more of that scene core aesthetic with elements that really align closer to the fan music approach, going for much more of a theatrical cinematic bend to her vocals. And I'm sorry, she still just sounds like a teenager where there's not really a ton of dynamics or professionalism to her vocal delivery. It really just feels like she's kind of dragging this song down, which is a bit of a shame because as a song itself, it's genuinely good production wise. But honestly, even with that in mind, I can see it maybe growing on me with a raw, more authentic sound, which this is definitely going for. And honestly, it's actually pretty decent. I can see why this is blowing up worldwide. And at the rates going, it might hit the whole 100 next week, which will be genuinely awesome. And yeah, it's fine. I don't mind it. But now onto Media Base, and oh my god, this was a rough week. Talk about some utterly questionable artists getting mainstream breakthroughs. All 3 of the debuts on Mediabase were horrific, not to spoil much. And that's really telling as well how rough this week is when Satisfied by Calvin Harris and Jazzy held another week at number 1, where it looks like this is actually sticking around, despite the fact that Warm is abandoning it too. Not the first time we'll talk about it, but yeah, I don't see this lasting next week at number 1, but it's still way higher than it should be. But man, I really hope that I Need You by Bunce and Malou is actually able to get to the top at currently at number 2. It's actually looking like it's going to get there with some decent momentum across the board. That's really welcome for me. But also what we'll probably end up getting there is somehow even better with Houseboy by Aluna, Will Sass and Timbaland at number 3. Yeah, all these names are going to get number 1 hits in 2026. That's genuinely surprising, even if the song is excellent. But that's also not factoring in Ultra Love by Kashmir, Jason Ross and Brianna Grace at number 4, which isn't on track to hit number 1 at the moment, but with the consistent upwards momentum it's got, it might actually get there. That would be awesome, not gonna complain. Then there's the expected collapse of Don't Wanna Go Home by Medusa featuring Henry Camellia, number 5. Okay, at this point you really should push silence on this format, it would do really well. Especially when this will likely fall past Echo by the Chainsmokers and Oaks in number 6, which is at least showing some signs of sticking around, even if it is slowing down a little bit in upwards momentum. I'm just amazed it's still here, that's definitely welcome. But on the opposite end, there's Get Away by Kungs and Boys Noise at number 7. Thank God this is looking like it's gonna stall out too. People really do not need more new disco from Boys Noise. They're way better in the bass music side of things. This is just not good. But then there's the next 3, which are all jumps into the top 10, and honestly I'm not really gonna complain about some of these, like Meet Again by Cascade Leighton Jordani and Natalie Jane at number 8, where this is actually showing some genuine upwards momentum, and it's really impressive how well Cascade's been able to actually stick around. I've been really excited to see where he's going with all these new singles, and they're all looking like they're actually going to be genuine hits. Something I can't say for Don't Worry Baby by Dom Dollar and Tigger at number 9. Okay, seriously, why is this actually sticking around the US? It's utterly flopping on Warm Global Dance right now, and considering the song is a badly produced and dated clunker, I have absolutely no idea why people are still keeping this around. We can move on. Thankfully, we end on the best of these 3 with Free Your Mind by Prosper and Clooney at number 10. It's finally got here after a prolonged run that really should have gotten a lot more momentum earlier, but hey, it's actually going to stick around. That's welcome for me. But on the opposite end, we've got our fall-offs. And again, there's not really a ton that I can really complain about here either. Yes, Magnetic by the Bowser weirdly did not get any sort of momentum in the US, but given that streaming is not really behind it there, and the fact that it actually is sticking around on Warm is really indicative of its success in Europe, I'm not surprised that it's gone here. But if it's going to take out Heart I Never Met by Blake G after a monumental flop run, again, it's really telling how much this utterly collapsed after hitting the top 20. It's also very suspicious. Yeah, I'm not really going to complain, especially alongside, well, All Cried Out by Frank Walker and Salim Elise, which is going for more of Frank Walker's more bland future bass approach, with a vocal performance from Salim Elise that's not remotely interesting or really able to stand out from the majority of female vocalists that Frank Walker gets. And given that his production sounds so sanitized and boring here, yeah, this was a big disappointment for me. I thought that Salim Elise would be able to follow up Man of Disney with some actual potential, but between this and Fake a Smile, she's just not really been doing great on EDM songs. Where things get a lot more interesting comes in our falls, where all of them were expected exits of really varied quality, let's be real. Out Late by Loud Luxury and Sad Boys at 13, Favor by Fisher and Tones and I at 18, Beautiful Places by Tiesto and Brianna Grace at 19, and Lost in the Woods by Adriatic and Elderbrook at 28, which on a side note is absolutely excellent. It's a song that I haven't covered, but man, I really wish I did. This sort of Rufus du Sol-esque deep house with some gorgeous atmosphere and vocals from Elderbrook that make me realise just how much he's been dearly missed on these charts the last couple of years. Yeah, not really going to complain that it's made the year-end list. It's a genuinely excellent track. Then there's Save My Love by Kygo, Khalid and Griffin at 29, New Religion by BB Rexha and Faithless at 32, and Just the Way You Are by Milky and Mulgrab at 49. All these are likely going to make the year-end list too, and given that some of these are really damn good, again, not really going to complain that much. But for the jumps and comebacks, well, okay, there were 2 here that actually came back that I haven't talked about, so let's dedicate little mini reviews to them, shall we? The first is One More Sunday by Piggin at 40, and wow, it's really nice to see that Oscar Menke's more relaxed deep house approach is actually netting some success for other artists, because this going for much more of that atmospheric sound with guitars that sound fantastic, it really does work for me, especially with that really warm and welcoming atmosphere against the uncredited female vocals that sound really pretty. It results in a whole song that just sounds fantastic, and honestly, given that summer's come around, I can see this having a bit of a run. That would be genuinely welcome. But what surprised me in the best possible way was the return of Carry Me Home by Above and Beyond and Zoe Johnson at 48, which I'm unfortunately not expecting to stick around, considering that the singles after Starterfire just haven't really been able to stick around from this album. And given the shirt that I'm wearing, you could probably indicate that I'm actually a huge fan of this album, and I'm really happy that a lot of it's getting momentum. But given the sort sort of atmospheric progressive house that this goes for, which is so classically above and beyond. It really doesn't surprise me that I love this. It's a genuinely great track, and Zoe Johnson on vocals, again, it's always welcome for me. As for the jumps, well, Christ, there's 12 of them. 10 if you exclude Meet Again and Don't Worry Baby in the top 10. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about here. Thankfully though, there's a lot of quality here, alongside some songs that I haven't actually covered before that are worth talking about as well. But before those, Give Me Love by Lazewa 11, I'm really happy that this is catching on. Sad Girls by BB Rexa and David Guetta at 14. Moving to the Sun by Hugo, Lamel, Angel and Ultra Nate at 17, where I'm significantly less excited about both of these. Then followed by Beautiful by Nemo and Joji at 23, and well, In Your Eyes by Alesso and One Republic at 26. These are both generally generic but really damn good songs. I'm not complaining about them being here either. But where I can complain comes in our two lowest jumps, with Look From You by MKX at 37. Seriously, this is actually catching on, are you kidding me? As well as Masquerade by Paul Oakenfold featuring Two Lots off the debut to 41. Really? People are actually giving this momentum? But that leaves some allies that I haven't talked about, starting with Daydreams by Wookie and Allegra Miles at 21, where this is going for much more of that bouncier techno adjacent production that you hear off of songs like Saving Up by Dom Dollar, going with the choppy vocal samples from Allegra Miles, who actually sounds really nice here, especially against a groove that's way more bouncy and upbeat than I expected from Wookie. Honestly, between this and Sunshine My Girl, I've actually been really impressed with what he's released after Edge of 17. It's a shame he's not getting as much momentum nowadays. Then there's the utterly surreal No Broke Girls by GT Office, Matthew Topper and DJ Snowden, actually gaining momentum to 34, and I've already hinted at this one a couple of times, but seriously, it's just utterly surreal that GT Office of all people is making a boys version of No Broke Boys, where the lyrics are actually flipped to be somewhat interesting and kind of funny, even if the production is an utter turd with some really bad tech house mixing, and really the budget's showing through here, and again, it's a problem with GT Office for a while now. So while I don't think this is a good song, it's at least entertaining to see here. It'd be really interesting if it actually lasts though. But before we get to that final jump, let's just breeze through what debuted on Billboard's charts, and honestly I can't really complain. Alongside Devotion, Swedish Emotion by Joel Corey and Ra at 40, we got Sacrifice by Audion and Sam Harper at 37. Again, it's really telling just how reliable Audion is to deliver some really quality house, and with Sam Harper delivering some fantastic vocals here against a mix that's way closer to progressive house yet again, it's really continuing that streak. I would really like to hear more from Sam Harper too. Between this and Waterfall, she's got a lot of potential. But that leaves one other debut that was also a jump on Media Basis charts, and thankfully falls under my best criteria here, being number 36, Like a Child by Armin van Buuren and RG featuring Marlo Rex. At this point, I'm legitimately shocked that Armin van Buuren has been able to get so much success off of his recent material, especially considering how utterly bloated both Feel Again and Breathe were, the latter of which scored so many major hits on dance radio that kind of surprised me, and it's at a point now where he's actually gaining more momentum from the post-album singles, with this one being in collaboration with Argy, who most of you probably know for his work on Medusa's label and collaborating with Medusa themselves. He's actually on the pretty decent rise as part of the future techno movements. So the fact that this turned out legitimately great is genuinely amazing to me, but it seems like Armin van Buuren going back to his roots and ditching the more mainstream friendly approaches he's done with a lot of songs from Breathe, it worked wonders here, because this genuinely really worked for me. I mean, Marlo Rex is the biggest standout here, where her voice is intentionally mixed to sound a little bit more lo-fi than I expected, but actually it kind of works in a way, because it really does highlight how powerful her vocals are, especially when she hits her upper range. She just sounds fantastic on this track. I would like to hear more from her. And when this mix soars into some really gorgeous drops with melodies that just sound fantastic, and a tempo that's a lot more driving and doesn't keep the song in place like a lot of future techno can get, I'm honestly not surprised that radio jumped on board with this really fast. It's genuinely really welcome. I mean, it's not really groundbreaking by any means, but considering how much that Van Buren can absolutely go off the rails at certain points, this being really grounded and sounding this excellent, it really does work for me. Great track. And now onto the media-based debuts proper that are significantly worse in every single way, beginning with number 46, Lovers on the Dance Floor by Blondish featuring Curtis Wells. I wish all the conversation around Blondish at this point was confined to just the music, but given her recent antics, it unfortunately will probably never end up being like that. I mean, I was already on the fence with her given the whole crypto girl nonsense that she was spewing a couple of years ago, especially with her embracing of NFTs, and she's still somehow doing that in 2026. You'd think she would know better, but that's before all the notable pro-Israel stuff that she's been doing, which is a lot harder to ignore when she puts it into her live shows, to the point where several festivals have outright cancelled gigs from her. It's disgusting, and she really should know better at this point. And with all of that in mind, yeah, can you blame me for not really wanting to give much attention to her as a person, especially in this case where the music's not particularly interesting to really justify having her around? It's a shame too, because between this and Never Walk Alone, she's still got some good production instincts. There's a really nice bass line here, even if the mix does sound a bit too flat for my liking. And really, it's elevated by Curtis Wells, who just sounds great on vocals here, going for much more of that whimsical approach that actually sounds really nice, especially with the mixing muffling his voice a little bit, where he's able to flow into this mix quite nicely. Really, in terms of acts I want to see actually stick around, Curtis Wells is definitely one of the main ones for me, especially with this and the Another collaborations, proving that he's got a lot of potential in this scene. I just wish they worked with people who weren't Blondish, and given that the production here isn't excellent, yeah, I don't really have a reason to come back to this. It's not bad on its own though, I can at least understand why radio's on board, but yeah, I think we can all move on from Blondish at this point. Just gonna say that. Number 45, Torture of the Heart by Dubs and Nelly Furtado. Although, man, if the alternative is more fucking Dubs music getting mainstream traffic, I can at least say that I would prefer getting Blondish over this, and my god, at this point it's just getting ridiculous. Why the hell is dance radio still supporting these guys? And even more baffling is why Nelly Furtado is even here. You think she would have good taste in collaborations, especially considering she's worked with S.G. Lewis for God's sake, but she seems to have thrown that right out the window for two of the worst people that are in mainstream EDM right now, and I really don't have to go over the incident again, but quite frankly, it should be brought up whenever possible because it's just disgusting that these guys are still around. And man, in this case, it doesn't help that the song absolutely blows too. There's no reason why this should be gaining any sort of momentum. The painfully flat trance groove with next to no melody to really sign through besides the bass, which again is emphasized over everything else, which for trance music is not remotely good. It doesn't sound nice. Not helped by some utterly terrible mixing on Nelly Furtado's vocals, which pushes her far too far back in the mix, but given what she's doing on this song, I think that might be a blessing in disguise because her wailing delivery here is utterly baffling and terrible. Seriously, she's way better when she goes for much more of that seductive sexual approach, but with this going for something completely off of her comfort zone, it just proves that she's just far beyond her prime at this point. And when the production is this bad and really highlights how much Dubs has fallen off in terms of production quality, yeah, again, remind me why we're keeping these guys around, because this is utterly terrible, and quite frankly, I hope it flops just like Promises did. This is garbage. Skip it. Number 44, Heartless by Mia Takarabi and Steve Aoki.
That's what I got if I turn the lights down. Out of sight of my energy, so I tune it on now. Sit in darkness.
And speaking of names we don't need anymore, well, at least in this case I can understand why this charted, especially considering that Steve Aoki actually has a proper charting song with Yapake at the moment, even if that song is mediocre at best and he's still not really been able to bounce back in quality for a while now. And all of this to serve as the debut single for Mia Takaraba, who is a J-pop adjacent act from Australia, who has been labelled as one of the fresh faces of the new movement of it, so working with Steve Aoki is your way of actually getting there. That Ali baffles me. But yeah, this sucks too. An Ali bad, dated slap house clunker with no real interesting elements to stand out, as Steve Aoki's mixing and mastering just continues to go downhill with mixing that sounds so flat and lifeless. Not really helped by Mia Tekarabi's really flat vocal performance where she doesn't stand out at all, which for an act priming themselves as a new face of J-pop is a really bad sign. A lot of acts from there actually have personality, which she doesn't. And while the guitar sounds at least passable on the verses, it's utterly ruined by the drops where the vocal chops just sound terrible. Again, if you're ruining vocal chops on a song like this, it's a really bad sign. It's once again proof that Steve Aoki is several years behind the trends, and given that Mia Tekarabi is showing absolutely no potential here, I'm not really expecting this to have much staying power, and considering that it's her first release, yeah, yikes, not a good sign. Skip this one too. But after all that, dear God, I really hoped Warm would actually bounce back, and while it did have at least one debut I was interested in, the other one was from Jazzy and Chris Lorenzo, and the quality overall was not exactly great. That's not really surprising. Although at least with it we got a very historic moment, as Talk to You by Another featuring 54 Ultra is at number 1, where this has finally ended up actually surpassing the 1000 spin threshold, and is now not only the song with the biggest spin count in the history of this chart, but also the biggest gap with number 2, going to New Religion by BB Rexha and Faithless, which is utterly collapsing in its own right and has a spin count of around 750, but it only got here because other songs above it utterly collapsed. Although it was really close to Free Your Mind by Prosper and Clooney at number 3, where this only had a single spin difference, and I expect that this will jump up next week. That's definitely welcome. That top 2 will be genuinely great. But what utterly caused this jump was the collapse of Satisfy by Calvin Harris and Jazzy at number 4. Quite frankly, it's got no staying power behind it whatsoever, and given the momentum is only dying off and people are realizing how much of a boring, terrible trash fire that this is, yeah, we can move on from this. I'm really hoping that Warm continues to throw it out. And hey, it will probably allow some songs to jump up beneath it, like, say, Move Into the Sun by Hugel, Ultra Nate and Amal Angel at number 5. Yeah, not exactly a good sign there. Or Favor by Fisher and Tones and I at number 6, although this one I really don't expect will jump up again. It's only here thanks to generally decent stability, but other than that, it's not exactly all that interesting, and at this point, it probably could get replaced by the new single that will come next week, given radio's weird embracing of those songs a bit later than others. Hell, I could say the same about Magnetic by The Balsa at number 7, and really I hope that Lose Myself actually charts there. It's a great track as well. Then there's Zone by MK featuring Poppy Bascombe at number 8, which is just not going anywhere. Geez, really telling how much of a middling chart run this has. It's almost as bad as the song itself. Hell, I would say the same thing about Sad Girls by BB Rexha and David Guetta at number 9, at least in terms of its hot dance run, which is still utterly terrible. And given they should be well overtaking New Religion at this point, and it saw a massive jump in the top 10, I think it's really telling that this isn't getting as much momentum as people would have expected. It's also not a good song. And finally, Shinjuku by Frankie Rosato at number 10. Honestly, I'm surprised it's still up this high at all, but it looks like it's going to stick around. That's welcome. But what didn't last came in our 2 fall-offs, where both were not surprising at all. Don't Worry Baby by Dom Dollar and Tiga was an utter monumental flop on this chart, so I wasn't really surprised that this went, as well as Don't Want to Go Home by Medusa featuring Henry Chamomile, which was going to lose out the moment that Silence actually gained momentum, and given that it saw a jump this week that I'll talk about later on, yeah, this wasn't surprising at all. Not really surprised with a lot of our falls either, and yes, I include In Your Eyes by A Lesser One Republic at 23 with them. It's a weird case of radio seeming to really ditch a lot of songs for at least a momentary time, and really it's common around the 3 or 4 week mark. I'm not really surprised. I expect this will rebound fast. But the rest includes Serotonin by James Hype just not getting anywhere at 18, kind of interesting, as well as Shades of Blue by John Summer, D-Vault and Julia Church at 29, which isn't really lasting much either. Then there's Awake Tonight by Afrojack, Sia and David Guetta at 32, Morning Coffee by Goodfella featuring Jits1 at 39, and most unsurprising for me, David Guetta's remix of Just The Way You Are by Milky at 35. Quite frankly, this really isn't surprising given that the remix has not really been able to maintain a lot of momentum on streaming, and given that More Grab's version is both better and more popular, yeah, this was going to get ditched at some point. Not really surprised. And since we had no comebacks this week and the jumps were extremely 50-50 in quality and quite short, yeah, let's just blow through these, and yeah, I'm not really happy happy about Sad Girls in the top 10, especially alongside Sorry Puppy by Topic and Becky G at 25. Seriously, we're giving this guy a radio hit in 2026, but at least we got Live It All by Lost Frequencies at 30, and Silence by Medusa featuring Rani rebounding up to 19. These are both good songs. They can probably balance out pretty nicely. And on the topic of solid, at least our first debut showed some promise, being number 33, Whatever Turns You On by Axwell featuring BLOND. Surprised that it's taken this long for a member of Swedish House Mafia to work with BLOND at all. I mean, he was one of the main voices in the EDM scene of the late 2010s, which favoured more towards festival house, and given that Swedish House Mafia were pioneers in that scene, I'm kind of surprised that one of their members has actually taken this long to work with BLOND, especially considering that their instincts on their solo material have been really interesting as of late, and BLOND could be a great fit for them. And given how much I really liked A New Day by Sebastian Ingrosso, I was at least hoping that his former duo mate in Axwell would actually be able to go through with something similar here, and honestly, this kind of really surprised me. Think of those flashy, stabbier synths that come through on Free Your Mind by Prosper and Clooney, but with a percussion line that leans closer to techno rather than festival house, but with a slower tempo to actually make it fit more in that scene. And honestly, in production alone, I actually think this is really damn good. It ditches the more sanitized elements for this scene and goes for something more raw and grittier with some bass mixing that sounds both bouncy and incredibly satisfying. It's almost to the point where BLOND on vocals is unfortunately the weakest part of the song against all odds. I mean, he does feel a bit too covered in terms of reverb here. He honestly could have had a lot more presence in the mix, and given that his more melodic instincts aren't really shown through here, it does drag the song down a little bit for me. But in terms of a fun festival-ready club banger, this honestly surprisingly really worked for me, and given the quality of both these acts, I wouldn't really mind them actually sticking around and doing more solo material. I mean, again, the Swedish House Mafia stuff is good, but this stuff is showing a dimensionality to their sound that I'm honestly finding really impressive. And this is genuinely good. Good stuff. Finally, number 31, Invisible by Jazzy and Chris Lorenzo. With this, I knew this was going to be a complete disaster from the moment I saw the artists involved. I mean, seriously, you take one of the least talented and most one-dimensional singers in the scene who can't really produce songs to save her life, and pair it with Chris Lorenzo, who only really shows quality when he works with much better producers. Certainly not on his own. And after hearing this, yeah, it was about as bad as I expected. And seriously, this is terrible. Why the hell are we giving this momentum? Just like within this beer, it goes for more of that much more stuttery and not particularly good brand of tech house, where the elements are just not meshed together well at all, with those acidic synths next to the more funkier disco elements that, again, don't sound natural in the slightest. And of course, given that Jazzy is not a remotely good singer, she just makes this already boring song even worse, with lack of dimensionality or dynamics to make this stand out at all. Again, why the hell do we keep giving her hits on this chart? She's not worth any sort of mainstream momentum at this point. And when the vocal mixing on the hook is even worse, as both voices are panned to the very far sides of the ears and sound terrible, yeah, this is utterly useless to me. Why the hell do we keep giving these acts momentum? Seriously, this blows. Skip this too. And that's a fitting end to a horrible week where there were actually some contenders for the worst here, so screw it. The tie for the worst of the week here between Me Chico by DJ Goja, Jason Derulo, and barely Melody at all, and, well, Invisible by Jazzy and Chris Lorenzo. Again, why the hell do we keep these two around? With this honourable runner-up also being a tie between Torture of the Heart by Dubs and Nelly Furtado, and Heartless by Mia Takarabi and Steve Aoki. Again, why the hell do we keep both of these producers around? They're utterly not good at this point. For best though, it's easily going to Like a Child by Armin van Buuren and Argy featuring Marlo Rex, with Cutie Moo Moo Magic by Toby Fox featuring Camellia as the honourable runner-up. And honestly, Axwell was pretty close there. I'll give it to him as well. Next week, provided that Billboard hasn't utterly fumbled their main dance pop charts, we could see maybe a Madonna album bomb. It's at least got potential to debut on streaming if anything else. And with nothing really of note besides that, I at least hope it's better than this. Dear God. But yeah, that's all for this episode of an analysis of dance. See you next time.